This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
.07 at WPSL 1590, the talk of the Treasure Coast. You are on Ask a Rabbi here on WPSL.
And this is Rabbi Shafir Lobb of Congregation Eitz Chaim talking to you this morning. And I'm looking forward to hearing from some of you at 772-340-1590. Please feel free to give me a call and ask any question that you might want to ask a rabbi. And I will do my best to answer it. I don't promise to have all the answers, but I certainly will try. And so I received some information that said that our topic last week was a little bit on the hot side, that people kind of liked it, and so I welcome questions on that or anything else. I think I mentioned at the time that there's this quote that's often taken quite a bit out of context in the book of Leviticus, and I didn't bring my scriptures with me today, but I'm sure that those who are strong in one direction or the other in LGBTQ rights knows the one. It's the one that is usually translated as "you shall not sleep with a man as you do with a woman," or something along those lines. And a couple of interesting things about that quote. First of all, it follows a really important text that talks about you shouldn't reveal the shame of your mother, because that will shame her and your father. You shouldn't shame any of your sisters, whether born in your house or not, because that is the shame, again, of your parents. And then it goes on, it says, and not your sister-in-law, not your aunt, not your daughter, not your daughter-in-law. Yeah, right. And it goes on through cousins and even your neighbor's wife. It ends up with the neighbor's wife.
But mostly women.
It's all women. And then at the bottom of it is this line that says, and don't do the sex bed, which is a word for intimacy. Don't get dirt on the males either. Yeah. So it's kind of a different, it's not about not, it's just not about LGBTQ. Right, it's about what you don't do in families, you don't do among neighbors. You don't run around flaunting intimate, private information. That's the piece. Whether sex is involved or not, the sex bed is a term for intimacy, and it's probably really interesting to me. Right, that's a quote that has been used and abused for generations.
Isn't that common sense?
One would think it might be, but apparently, so maybe that is
not in Hollywood, but I mean.
Yeah, well, I understand, but the segue is right. Some of the laws that Stewart talked about on
Yes.
Ask a Lawyer, there was the one about not dying chicks and
yeah.
Right, that's about animal cruelty. And so, the question you have to ask when you see a law like that on the books is clearly people were not following common sense, right? It makes common sense to not dye chicks cute little colors to sell them at Easter time. But unfortunately, we see a lot of that, and some of the dyes that have been used are toxic, and so it's animal cruelty. That's
okay. See that now this makes sense.
Now it makes sense, right? Yeah, and that's always the question when I see something. Any kind of a law.
Yeah, but the way the law was written was
it sounds
crazy.
funny, but the question you always have to ask, and maybe this is the rabbi training, is what was the event that preceded the writing of the law? Right? As I like to point out to people, and this one you'll recognize, right? They didn't have a speed limit on Speedway in Tucson until people started speeding.
Yes.
And and the same is true with 95. Before I-95 and Highway 1, you didn't need a speed limit in the area because people weren't speeding. They weren't doing those kind of speeds. And so laws tend to try to regulate behavior
Mm-hmm.
when people don't do it for themselves. If nobody stole, we would not need to have any don't steal, whether it's alligators or anything else. Right. And again, I can see that, somebody poaching somebody else's alligator. That would really, if somebody's got an alligator farm, it's probably what it's really after. Not that I'm into farming alligators, and that's a whole nother long story. But, so you got to always look at what was the preceding.
That's intriguing. And
Yeah.
no, it's
Right.
yeah.
What was the preceding event that led to the law that we look at and think is kind of strange? Right. And sometimes it is. Sometimes it's people trying to control others. There's no question. Some weird thing, like an HOA telling you can't have a shrub over 4 feet.
Yes.
Some of that's control, and it's done to certain individuals' tastes. So you've got all kinds of things. That's use and abuse of law.
You mean an architectural committee?
Yeah, something or other.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get started before I get
Oh, no.
before I get hit by those folks upset with me. So but if we look at, like I said, if we look at that scriptural text, that's not about whether or not two people who are the same sex should be allowed to have joy together or intimacy together. That's not what it's about. It's about what you do with the information you glean, that pillow talk, regardless of who it's with. Yeah. Kind of changes the shade of it, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, a lot.
Quite a bit.
Yeah.
And, and there's always the other answer that I always like about it when people say, you shan't lie with a man as you do with a woman, assuming that you're a man doing that and not a woman reading it, because, what should I say, right? But the truth is that sex is different if it's same sex. The pleasure might be the same, but, the physics are different. Okay? And so in some ways that law makes no sense if that's what it's all about. So clearly, that would be a silly law. And I don't think too many of them are. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting that you say that. When he was rattling off some of these absolutely insane laws.
Well, they sound insane out of context.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah, but, what were
Yeah.
the events leading up to
Right.
the drafting?
Right. When cars first came out, horseless carriages first came out, they scared the living daylights out of horses.
Oh, sure.
And so you had to go ahead of the car and warn the drivers that the car was coming. The riders, mostly, so that their horses didn't bolt and kill them.
Sure.
And damage the horse as well. When cars become dominant or common, that law becomes silly. So laws change. Laws change over time. And sometimes the archaic ones that don't get removed sound kind of funny.
But, that makes perfect sense that you say that about, I just think of the Amish.
Yeah.
I mean, they're trotting down the highway just like, we would in a car.
Yeah.
Except in a buggy and a horse.
Yeah. Exactly. And at a time when most of the people were on horses, especially the backfiring that was common in cars back then would be scary.
Sure.
And just the noise and everything else would be rattling. I have a young puppy at home. He's 6 months old. And, of course, last night was his first big experience with all of the neighbors illegally using their fireworks, right? Because it's illegal.
How did he handle that?
He was jittery, but he mostly looked to us, and we were kind of like chilled. And so he kind of chilled out. And we very purposely did that. We sat with him so that his first 4th of July should not be a harrowing experience. But, it was funny because I took him out right before I thought it was going to start, and I misgauged. They started as I walked out the door with him. It started in the neighborhood, and he kind of freaked out, and I just scooped him up and took him back inside and said, we'll go out later. And so after things settled down about 11:30, so I can understand, no fireworks after 11 if people go to bed at 11. if that's common, because it's noisy. But after things settled down, in my neighborhood was around 11:30. We had, I think, one person igniting them after that. But after everything was quiet and settled down, I then started to take him out. And he ran to the door to go out and then stopped. And I looked at him and I went, okay, so last time you were out, it was bang, whiz, noise that scared the living daylights out of you. No, you're not gonna give in to this. So we went out and we ran and played a little bit outside in the middle of the night. And so that was my way of trying to, un-PTSD the dog.
Mm-hmm.
People have no idea, but the number of birds that get killed by fireworks is just huge. It's absolutely huge. We're going to hear about it. The newspapers are going to be filled with different flocks that will have not been able to handle the fireworks set off.
I never even thought of that.
Most people don't. Right? Wildlife is horribly affected by some of the fireworks that go on. And in fact, in Florida, it's illegal to send off a firework from your lawn because the only thing you're allowed to use it for is, those attacking birds that Stuart talked about.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
You've got to have a bird problem in order to use them.
Huh.
So, yeah. It's actually the paper that somebody signs when they go and buy
to
them.
make them legal in
Right.
Florida. Yeah, okay.
Right. There's limited uses.
Yes.
Yes. And so people are perjuring themselves on this form.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there is law, but it's not enforced. Now, am I anti-fireworks? Not necessarily, but I'd like them to be a little more limited. I've seen where, once again, Met Stadium set the brush on fire next to the college.
Yeah.
Right, and that's right across the street from the temple. We watched that.
I was gonna say
One time, the one before this, we actually watched it. We saw it go up and go down and start the fire. And I will tell you that it terrorized the younger element. We had some teenagers and some kids at that service, and they ran and they said, is the temple going to burn? And we said, no, it's not going to get over here, at least not for a while, because it was back in the shrubbery. But so those are secondary thoughts. We need to be mindful. Fireworks are dangerous. They're
and let me
very,
tell you,
very
the
dangerous.
folks at IRSC were very, very concerned in 2017.
Yeah, that's the one I'm talking about.
Yeah.
The one 2 years ago.
Ooh.
Because it was a pretty good fire. We could see it. We could see the fire through the shrubbery from our front door. And like I said, it scared the kids. It scared the kids who were there. And so, yeah. So I can understand some statutes that might or might not be enforced. And there was, every year somebody, takes off fingers. Emergency rooms are filled with people who really shouldn't be playing with fireworks.
Well, yeah, that one New York Giant football player that blew off a couple fingers on 4th of July. It was like, you got to be kidding.
That's a great way to celebrate freedom, the
boy.
freedom to mangle yourself.
Yeah, really. Unbelievable. Yeah.
So, yeah. And that's the kind of thing that makes city councils pass strange laws, or at least they appear strange. It's worth noting, Beijing has outlawed fireworks on Chinese New Year because of the fire hazard and the pollution.
Well, yeah.
Right? I mean, they've got a serious pollution concern, and they don't need extra gun smoke or ash running around.
They're worse than Mexico City.
Yeah, they've got horrible pollution problems. And they also, are looking at it from a fire standpoint. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Talk about, a country where it's where it's originated and has been part of New Year's for them since a long, long time. And, it was traditional to put sheets of firecrackers. We can thank our fireworks. We can thank China for them.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Right,
yeah, most of them were made there. Yeah.
Yeah. Not only just made there, but, gunpowder comes from from China. Thank you.
Sure.
So lots of inventions came up and down that Silk Road that we may not think about, like spaghetti. Right? Marco
Yes.
Polo brought back noodles
Yeah.
from China from his 17-year stay in China. No, 17 or 24, might have been one or the other. I'm blanking right now on the number, but it was a good long time that he stayed in China. I think he was 17 when he got there, and it was 24 years or something like that before his family goes back to Italy. So he brought all kinds of things back from China and just, introduced a lot of Chinese things into Europe that Europe now thinks they invented.
Revisionist history,
Yes.
maybe?
Oh, it could be.
Yeah.
Never know. So lots of different things. And so when I look at something like the misuse of that text in Leviticus, and I think of how many people's lives have been made miserable by it, it's tragic. That's called cherry picking, when you pull something out of context and you use it to kludge somebody. And the thing that really was telling to me, I was at an LGBTQ sensitivity training that was put on in Tucson, and I happened to mention the translation of that chapter. One of the other rabbis there actually, dug out scriptures in Hebrew and looked at it and went, it is a noun. It is a noun, right? The sex bed. It's not sex, it's the sex bed.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So there's a difference. Right?
Okay.
There's a difference between sitting in an intimate place with someone and having sex. Maybe, maybe not, right? Depends on the circumstance and the individual's participating, but it's not necessarily sex. Is the point of it.
Okay.
And but I thought that was significant to me, where somebody said, oh, it is a noun, right? It's like the first time they really looked at the text. And if my colleagues are in that place, how much more so the folks that are trying to work from an English translation that was done with an agenda, right? Because certainly...
How many churches do that anyway?
Yeah, lots of people.
Oh, yeah.
Lots of people use and abuse the scriptures in a lot of different ways, using cherry picking for the most part. And it's the thing that I do the most when I'm dealing with text, is to look before and after it and see what's the context of the piece that you're using, because it might very well be something very different from what you think it will be. And so
you're bringing a whole different dimension to us reading the scriptures. I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
In other words, you really can't have a USA Today version.
You cannot just do it with sound bites.
Yeah.
Right. Sound bites get people wrong, right? Because they're sometimes taken out of context too. And, scriptures falls into the same category. I could probably find some really choice quotes if I really wanted to look at, Alice in Wonderland or something. And we do all kinds of stuff if I cherry picked. Yeah. Cherry picking is a very interesting activity. And yet we do need some sound bites to work with. We make functional principles and rules for ourselves out of sound bites. Yeah.
Now,
some of which are helpful, some of which are not.
with your religion, then, are there, if you want to call it, different cherry picking between Orthodox and
Yes.
Reforms?
There's different cherry picking between rabbis, even within the same movement.
Oh no.
And that's
Oh,
so
no.
part of what we tell people is, and the Orthodox know to do this, if you're going to talk to a rabbi, interview them first, find out where they're coming from, and then you'll know if you should ask the question you have. Right? Because, and I teach this actually in my ethics class, in my applied philosophy classes at IRSC, which is that you can take many different positions using the same system. depending on how you shape the argument and the premises.
Mm-hmm.
You can change totally. The only one that's really hard is I don't think you can get Kant to agree to capital punishment in any way, since he was adamantly opposed to it. But short of that, you could use utilitarianism to argue for prisons, or you could argue against them, right? Depending on how you define the terms within the system and which arguments you bring to bear. And everybody does cherry pick to some degree, myself included. We all have agendas. And I think, and so again, what I try to do both in my congregation, and I've done it here on the show, and everywhere that I am, I try to let people know what my biases are. Because I think that's self-disclosure that's important. You need to know where I'm coming from. And I used it last week. I said God doesn't make junk, right? That's one of my sound bites.
Yeah.
Right? God doesn't make junk. And that's important because I use that principle to help me understand where I want to go with the rest of everything. Right? If people aren't junk, which I think to me is pretty obvious, people are not junk, even if I don't like them, right? Even if I don't like them as a person, they're still not junk. They're still a human being, entitled to all the dignities and proper treatment and respect of being a human being, even if I don't like them. And so that gets back to...
What about a Charles Manson type individual?
I think you need to protect yourself, but that doesn't mean you don't treat them with respect, with human dignity, right? Well, so he's entitled... He's entitled to, if he's got appendicitis, to have surgery. Right?
Well,
he's entitled to clean food. Does he need to be confined? Yeah, because he needs to not be able to continue to do what he's doing. And until we are able to come up with a better prison system that rehabilitates instead of, caging for profit, then that's really what the American system unfortunately is right now, is cage for profit.
Mm-hmm.
And until we change that mindset, we're gonna have to just really hold the folks that are super dangerous and find a way to keep the bulk of society safe. Do I like that? No. Am I advocating that somebody who's a great manipulator be allowed to manipulate the system and get free? No. But, that's going to take some skills and some better way of knowing who's real and who's manipulating and who's what kind of dangerous. But that person is still entitled. That doesn't mean that you give him an opportunity to escape, but he's entitled to clean quarters, clean clothes, clean food.
I got you there.
Yeah.
No, I get that.
That to me is basic human respect. He's still got a soul of some sort, and he's still going to have to answer to God at some point. I can't do that for him. He's got to do that. But that's not between me. I'm not going to be his advocate between him and God.
Okay. No, that's intriguing. Yeah.
Right. So even people I don't like are entitled, if there's somebody that I don't like who walks into the building, I need to acknowledge them as a human being. I don't have to like them, but I have to acknowledge them as a human being. They are entitled to, and if their life is threatened by somebody unlawfully, right, as opposed to somebody who's, actively self-defending or something, they're entitled to protection. Right. So, somebody coming in a la Jack Ruby, right?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, right. That's not okay. Even if it saves the state money. Well, it really only transferred from one person to the next person. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. So that's what I mean by that. That we really do need to treat human beings like human beings. And recognize that unless they're aggressing against us, or somebody else that we can, nobody's allowed to aggress against somebody else.
How receptive do you find your students at IRSC to, some of the ethics discussions that
Some
you
more
have?
so than others. I've got a wide variety in the class. They come from all different disciplines. They come from all different backgrounds. I've got the ones with the great big, the crosses that almost need a crane to carry them, blazoned on their chests. And I've got the tattoos, and I've got, the mom who's got 3 kids, or the dad who's got 3 kids, who's trying to go to school to better themselves. And you've got the kid who's dual enrolled, who's, wide-eyed and first college class. So I've got the whole gamut. And I watch people struggling, right, with stuff that they thought was, carved in stone, and see that, well, maybe there's a different system and there's a different way of looking at it. For example, I think most people don't realize that capital punishment is extremely expensive.
Oh, yeah.
It's hugely expensive, right? It's millions of dollars. It's billions of dollars for those states that do capital punishment.
There were people on death row. I did a series on death row in California, I'm well aware, that had been there for 20, 25 years on death row.
Yeah. And it's much more expensive than just having life imprisonment.
Oh, yeah. You bet.
John Oliver did a great piece on it. He said, so how do we treat people that we want to execute? We, give them the budget of a Star Wars movie, right? Because that's what the average cost for an execution is. It's huge.
Oh, yeah.
And then when you look at a 4% wrongful conviction of innocent people, that's scary.
That's starting to come into play now with all the DNA stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we've got better tools, and a number of people have been exonerated who have been saying, I was innocent all along, and the general perception is if the police nab you, you're guilty. The police are doing what they do to try to find the suspect, and sometimes it doesn't work. Right? Sometimes police are just as biased and bigoted as the people they're around, because they're human. And so we need to have protections for everyone involved. And that gets back to that common dignity, right? In our country, it is a premise that we are innocent until proven guilty. And that doesn't always seem to be practiced, to put it mildly. And certainly not in the public media. It's real easy for people to convict people long before the evidence ever gets brought into court or discussed or sees the light of day. And that's unfortunate. I think we could, as a country and as a people, we could elevate that quite a bit without a whole lot of effort.
Mm-hmm.
But it's going to take a sea change. It's going to take people becoming tired enough of what's going on to want things to be different. And we did it with smoking. We took my mother's generation. Everybody smoked because that was the cool thing. It was the way to show that you were an adult.
My mom and dad did too. Yep.
Yeah. And our now the kids coming up don't know from it anywhere near at the level. Right.
Yeah, I was fortunate. I never did.
Yeah. Yeah. And fewer and fewer today ever get exposed to it. And so, but now we've given R.J. Reynolds enough time to diversify and not go bankrupt. And all of the other tobacco companies, and not singling them out. It was the whole industry that had to have time to retool and diversify. That was the beginning of real diversification of corporate companies, so that they weren't tied to any one product, that they had to stay, so emphatically on it. But yeah, big, money talks. And
it's like when we started ESPN, we thought we were really hot stuff. We realized Getty Diversified owned most of the California almond and date industries, and we were just like a blip on their radar. It was so funny, you know. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you were right. It was all late 70s and
Yeah.
yeah.
Because that was a corporate survival strategy.
Well, and R.J. Reynolds had
Yeah.
bought a minority interest in ESPN. Yeah.
So there was lots of, you didn't want to have, and that in a lot of ways that makes a lot of business sense, because you don't want to have, like the date industry has a period where the money's coming in and the rest of the time it's money going out. ESPN has a time when the money's coming in and other times when it's going out. And each industry has its flow, its in and out flow. And so if you can balance industries, that makes a lot of business sense.
Oh, sure.
To keep a good cash flow so that your strong ones are carrying whichever ones are in the outflow mode. So, yeah. But that takes a lot of strategy. It takes knowing the market. I'm at a real high level talking about it right now, but and I give a lot of credit to the people who make those decisions and try to keep their companies afloat. Because if they make the wrong decisions, the companies are going to go under.
Mm-hmm.
And because it doesn't take too many months of negative cash flow to hurt a company, unless they're really, really got deep pockets.
And very few do.
Very few do. Most companies are not a whole lot different from people. They're, one paycheck away from trouble.
No, we understand that. Yeah.
Yeah.
As small business people, you
Yeah,
bet.
absolutely. And so, yeah, we've kind of like covered a field, folks. Do you have any questions for this rabbi? It's 772-348-1590. 772-340. What did I say? 340. 340-1590. Kind of like heard my mouth say the wrong thing, and that happens too. So I'm certainly the first one to say I can misspeak. I do it often, and it's good to be willing to acknowledge that you can make mistakes. I don't know it all, far from it, but I'm certainly willing to entertain a question if anybody has any. What would a Jewish take on children in cages issue be? Okay,
Whoa,
let's hit it right
okay.
hard, Cher. Thank you.
Good question.
It is a good question, and so I would say that it's not right. That's not giving them basic dignity. Right? They're entitled to a clean bed, good food, clean food, certainly healthy food for a kid, and not overcrowding. Those are basic things, and is it? There are not good answers for that, because we're supposed to take in folks that are hurting. Right? We're supposed to have hospitality, audacious hospitality, for people, especially children that are struggling, and people who are migrating. There have always been people migrating. And yeah, and Sharon also just says Jewish activists have been arrested, and that doesn't surprise me. If you're close to them, and if you stand up for what's right, they have rights. And I don't care if they're not citizens. I don't care if they're underage. They're human beings, right? If we're going to say that a fetus has a right to not be aborted, then good Lord, the child, that much more so, should be treated with dignity and respect.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a life. It's a life. It's not marks on a scale.
Right. No, I get you.
They're human beings, and the same way that I care about chicks not being dyed blue or purple for Easter, it's common. It's not any great stretch to say that children should be treated decently. And
in having been through the Holocaust.
There is that small detail. Yes.
Yes, small.
I'm being facetious.
Yeah.
Can you tell?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
That's got to be horrific. I know one of our friends up in Connecticut is very active in a Holocaust group, and, of course, very outspoken on our border situation.
And understandably so, right? Sharon just posted people saying that the kids are breaking the law and deserve to be. Um, you know, do they deserve to be detained? Possibly. But again, even somebody who's breaking a law is entitled to basic human dignity, not being overcrowded, having decent food, decent medical,
sanitation,
all of the and kids, they should be educated. They should be having to learn because they're kids. And so, basic human things. And I find it unconscionable to think of a 3-year-old as breaking the law. I'm sorry, the 3-year-old isn't here because they decided to march.
Right.
They got carried across, assuming they made it and didn't drown in a river or die in the desert. If they make it to a detention camp, they didn't do it voluntarily. But again, that's a Jewish thing, that kids are innocent. Kids, until they're old enough to know right from wrong, are not breaking the law. Their parents might be. But, again, you treat the kid decently, and that doesn't mean separating them from their parents. I'm sorry, it just doesn't. These are families that, to me, are risking it all. And, maybe I am a little bit passionate about it, and I don't normally talk about issues like that, but I am the daughter of immigrants. And my parents left where they were and came to America. And my brother and I were both born in the U.S. And I don't think that was wrong. I just don't. That has been an American thing. We say on the Statue of Liberty, right? Give me your huddled masses yearning to be free.
Yeah.
That's what we're made of. That's who and what we are. Now, granted, we do not treat the First Nation at all well, the folks who were here before us, in much larger numbers than they are even today. And we still keep them in way too...
A lot of them were slaughtered.
Yeah, a lot of them were slaughtered, and a lot of them were purposely infected with diseases, etc. And we see in a lot of nations, and it doesn't make it okay for the U.S., that very often indigenous peoples are not treated properly. They're viewed as something less than the invading forces.
Yeah, you hear Australia going through some issues like that.
Yeah, they're still dealing with that lost generation, the lost children. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, folks, you can either call me at 772-340-1590, and I'll be glad to answer a question about it, or you can Google Australia lost children, lost generation, because it's horrendous. They finally did apologize, but they're still not doing it right. And there's some wonderful videos out there of people who survived that ordeal and have been interviewed. And, what they basically did is they rounded up all the kids who weren't pitch black and put them on islands and kept them there basically until they were 18, and then cut them loose with no real training, no anything, and just and then said, look, they're not functional. It's like, well, duh,
Sure.
Yeah, if you don't give somebody skill sets, then they're not going to be functional. You take away what they have and you don't give them anything in replacement. That's really not. That's not giving somebody even half of a deck to play with. So, and ideally they should have been entitled to have their own tradition and not be taken from their families. But that's a whole long story. And the one thing I do is I give Australia some credit because they're at least owning up to having done it. Not as well as they might, but at least they're starting to, because it's not all that long ago. But, we look at all kinds of things. The C.P. Ellis is one of the articles, one of the people that we talk about. Ann Atwater and C.P. Ellis in Durham, North Carolina in 1971. C.P. Ellis was the Grand Cyclops of the KKK.
Ugh.
And Ann Atwater was an activist. And the black school, Durham was one of the last places to integrate the schools, even though it was a federal law. And there was ways for cities and states to get around it. And they started from this really diametrically opposed place and came together and eventually worked toward desegregating the schools. And there's a documentary out on it. You can Google again, C.P. Ellis. And I believe he has since passed. That Ann, I don't know if Ann Atwater is still alive or not. Was certainly a feisty person. But it's the story of how they got together and got to know each other, and she discovered that white people are not terrible, and he discovered that black people are not terrible. And imagine that we're all humans. You know.
Gee, what a surprise.
What a surprise, right? There is, after all, one human race, last I checked. And Sharon, you say that we're all children of immigrants. Well, unfortunately, some of us are the children of slaves. So they didn't even, an immigrant, you can say, comes in. My parents came to America by choice, somewhat. I mean, they didn't leave where they were by choice, but they, kind of picked where they ended up, and they decided to stay in America.
Yeah, slave ships just
just dumped people. Yeah. And their generations are here, not even with that, but just dumped. And so yeah, and then
that was a business too,
that was a business too. Yes, it was a way to make that middle passage on the 3-leg journey pay for itself. Yeah. And there's still slavery today. Still far too much slavery today. Some of it's child slavery. It's rife in the tea, coffee, sugar, those industries. A lot of industries, a lot of agricultural industries, and garment.
I was going to say
the garment industry.
You go and see
the overseas, mostly
$200 or $300 tennis shoes being made by a 5-cent an hour person.
Yeah. There's actually a website. I'll try to bring it in next week, but it's something slavery.org, where you can, based on your lifestyle, see how many slaves are supporting you.
Wow.
An eye opener. And it asks a lot of questions like, do you check for fair trade sourcing on your products? Do you use this? Do you use that? Yeah. Right? Because how many times do people opt for the cheapest item just because it's the cheapest instead of what else, what's involved? And then we could start.
That's intriguing.
And then we could start on the food industry. Oh. You want to talk about dyed chicks?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The difference between caged chickens and
free
range and and properly fed. The child labor laws. Yeah, that was an attempt at starting to get things fixed. And we're still a work in progress. And as I like to point out to my class, I might sound like I'm all gloom and doom. I'm not. We've made progress, right? Because back when the document said we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, shades of Bill Clinton, but it depends on what your definition of man is, right? Because in those days, man was over 21, white, male, owning an acre of land or more, and belonging to the right church. And if you weren't a man, you were a boy.
Belonging to the right church?
That was originally true. That's why they had to come up with the First Amendment, because when the colonies came together, they could not agree on any one church. Now, each colony had their own church. Right? So, for example, Virginia was the Church of England, and they didn't give that up. They stayed as Anglicans for a good long time until the 14th Amendment. So you would have thought that the First Amendment would have stopped that. But again, if you look at it carefully, it says Congress shall make no law regarding religion. It didn't say states couldn't, and it didn't. and cities and
Ooh,
everything else.
Yeah.
Right. And we're still pushing it down. We're still pushing it down. Right. So that organizations today are having to look at whether or not they're allowing people freedom of religion. But it's a push down. It's a push down, as is the definition of humans for man. Right? Because women have had the vote for almost 100 years, not quite. Blacks, 1965. Right? And as I just mentioned, desegregation didn't happen in Durham until the 70s. So, yeah, we are making progress, though. I look out at my class, which is where we started this discussion. I look out at my class, and it's a very diversified group. Right? There's blacks, there's Hispanics, there's Caucasians, we usually have a couple of First Nation folks in there. It's a nice diversified group. Got Middle Easterners in there. I've got all shapes, sizes, and colors. And that's how it should be. It should be this beautiful mosaic. And I know I've used that term, and you liked that.
I love that.
We are a mosaic. We are the American mosaic. And I think that's what makes America great, is that mosaic. Because we can bring a lot of different things to the table. We can have the richest, most beautiful fabric of a country if we put our minds to it and take advantage of all these things and use them, because that's what America has always done. That's how America went from this select group of men who were gentry, right? The landed gentry. And that was the goal of the Founding Fathers. They weren't out for the poor person to have all the same rights. They were out for the rich to have equal rights. But that's
amazing
okay.
how things change, right? Oh, yeah.
Well, so we've become better. I think we have become better. Do we do an occasional backstep and hurt ourselves? Yes. Right? Time will tell where that goes. What's a forward step and what's a back step. And, all to be broken out. And do I see no, okay. I thought we might have had a caller there. So you're welcome to call, because I've not had anybody calling today. In that 772-340-1590. We've got time for one or two quick calls, because we've only got about 5 more minutes on this hour. But you can certainly ask a question of the rabbi, and I'll try to get my hand down from in front of my face for the folks who are watching me streaming. The joy of it all. Got to tie her hands up and make her talk.
Oh.
Yeah, it's hard,
Well, my hands.
Yeah,
fly.
my hands.
Italian.
Yeah, my hands go all over the place. That's just my style. All right, so I guess nobody's going to call in today. That either means that you're fascinated with what I'm talking about, or you couldn't care less.
Or you're still hungover from
never
4th of
mind.
July.
Yeah, 4th of July. Those fireworks kind of numbed you. Yeah, that's where we started, right? We talked about that. So I'm waiting to hear all the fallout from the fireworks. So my dog came through okay, and my other animals, it wasn't their first 4th of July. So, but I think that our attitude really helped him. But if we had left him in his cage, he probably would have been traumatized. He was certainly jittery, and even as he tried to sit there and pretend to be calm, I could watch the ear just twitching with every noise.
Well, I bet.
That
Sure.
went outside, because they've got these radar ears, right? He's got ears that stick up, so it's like, they were buzzing. And I don't know what all he hears, because his hearing range is different than mine. If they can hear a squirrel or a lizard outside the door, their hearing is certainly different than mine, because I cannot hear those things.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah.
And I know that they do. And so, thank you, Al. We are all drops in the ocean of consciousness.
Ooh.
Her pulsing. Yep.
Wow.
So.
Drops in the
ocean of consciousness. Yeah.
Holy smokes.
Isn't that great? Yeah. Coming to us from the Sikh tradition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah. Another seeking tradition. So that's a question that we'll maybe entertain a little bit more next week. I'll spice it and say, let's talk next week a little bit about what is that makes Judaism unique. What makes Judaism different? I've been talking to a lot of people, and that's as good a segue as any way to mention that we're going to be doing a Taste of Judaism, and stand by for the dates. That'll be a series of 3.
Huh. Okay.
And then we'll start a Judaism 101 course in the fall. So, yeah, lots of things. And the Taste of Judaism, by the way, for everybody who wants to know, it's an opportunity to come and get just that, a little taste of Judaism. No commitment from anybody to do anything. Each class is independent to itself. There's 3 classes that talk about spirituality, that talk about community, and that talk about tradition and things like that.
Oh, I thought you were talking about kosher deli.
Well, we'll have some of that too. We usually do. Last time we had lox, and we had lots of good stuff. And I think there were deli sandwiches and all kinds of stuff.
Canners in West Hollywood.
There you go. Yeah, I wish we could have a deli, a good old New York deli down here. But
that would be nice.
Yeah.
Yes.
So. And if you've got one of those and I just don't know about it, let me know and send me a pastrami. Send a salami. What was it? I think it was at Katz, I think, used to say, send a salami to your boy in the Army. A little bit sexist there, but what can I say? But now we're moving. We're moving on a lot of things. So I guess is another answer to your question. Kids are a lot more accepting of their eclecticness and their mosaicness.
Mm-hmm.
They're willing to not come down hard on each other, even if their parents do.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, and that's good.
I think it's very, very good. We need to do a lot more of that.
Yeah.
So this has been Shafir Lobb of Congregation Eitz Chaim for Ask a Rabbi. Please check us out Friday nights and Saturday mornings and Mondays at 1 for meditation. Again, this is Shafir Lobb for Ask a Rabbi. Have a great week.
You've been listening to Ask a Rabbi right here on WPSL, Port St. Lucie, WPSL.com, webcaster to the world, on Alexa and Google Home.